Hey everybody, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. Well, after a week that was bizarre on a number of levels, I'm finally back here in Boston and ready to film the next podcast. So, longtime viewers or frequent viewers in recent months will know that one thing I particularly love to do with segues is to blend the big hits with the obscurities. That way, you give the crowd what they want and at the same time introduce them to something new that they probably haven't heard before. And this week is a pretty stark example of that. The first song is a Peter Gabriel track called White Ashes. That's the obscurity, obviously. And the hit is Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. Now, I'll get into Kashmir in a moment. That's the one everyone knows. But as I've stated recently, most of the time when you're doing a hit and an obscurity, I like to start with the obscurity to sort of gently lead the crowd toward the hit. Now, White Ashes is a song with a fascinating history because Peter Gabriel was hired to write the music for the Millennium Dome show, which was sort of a performance arts Cirque du Soleil-like show that was supposed to be the center attraction at the Millennium Dome, which is a big futuristic exhibition, kind of Epcot-like thing that was supposed to be launched in the year 2000 to start the new millennium up in Canada. I want to say Quebec, but it might be... it's Montreal. I'm not entirely certain. But suffice it to say, the show and indeed the Millennium Dome itself, between things going over budget and planning going wrong, it never really got anywhere. It closed shortly after it actually opened. So, but the music that Peter Gabriel wrote has lived on. He released an album called Ovo in 2000. Now, funnily enough, Cirque du Soleil more recently had a show called Ovo, and released an album of the same name. It is not the same thing. I can't tell you how many times I've had to explain to people that it is not the same thing. But some of the songs from the Ovo album lived on in Peter Gabriel's live sets and in other projects. And this is one of them, sort of, because on the Ovo soundtrack album, there's a song called White Ashes, but it's basically a drum pattern, ambient sounds, and some voices singing this melody, I believe in just meaningless syllables. It might be in another language, but I haven't been able to find any language that it's in. So it sounds something like this. And that's basically it. It was one of the more background pieces as opposed to one of the lyrical songs. However, in 2000, flash forward to 2004, Peter Gabriel had just completed two very successful tours called Growing Up, which are his first tours since 1994. So they were hugely successful, and there was a lot of demand for more shows at more locations. So Gabriel decided to take the band on the road again, basically over all of Europe, for a tour called Still Growing Up. And because he had done the Growing Up tour not terribly long before, he wanted to do a few new tracks, and this is one of them, because unbeknownst to the rest of the world, behind the scenes, Gabriel had written lyrics to the White Ashes track that basically tell part of the story of the Millennium Dome show. It's a sort of a moralistic tale, a parable, if you will. And this particular section, it talks about a character named Ian, spelled Ian, but Ian, who just a revolutionary young man who wanted to change the world, to help his people, his family, to make things right, and basically it all went horribly, horribly wrong. So this song kind of is kind of at the moment of his demise, if you will. So, as you can sense from this, it's a fairly dark song. And the only place you'll be able to hear this is, pretty much have to be a pretty hardcore Gabriel fan, which I like to consider myself, to know this, because you have to have either gotten the Still Growing Up DVD, not Growing Up, but Still Growing Up, which is pretty difficult to find, or purchase one of the official bootlegs from the 2004 tour. And what that means is Gabriel had recording artists, recording engineers from a website called themusic.com come with him on tour and record every show through the soundboard, and they would sell the shows individually or box the whole tour. And basically, so if you were there, or if you really wanted to hear a certain performance, you could buy the CD, the album of that show. I happen to have quite a few of these. And if you happen to get most of them from that 2004 tour will have this lyrical version of White Ashes. So it's pretty obscure, but it can be found on YouTube and similar places, and I recommend looking into it because it's very cool. Gabriel is purportedly recording a new album at last, 13 years after finishing his last album of new material. He's had the orchestra project in between. So I'm holding out hope that this new version might make it on there, because it's very cool. This is a verse chorus, just to give you a sense of it. And notice that this song, again, it's in the key of D. It's very dark. You're not really sure if it's in major or minor, because it kind of flirts with both. But it makes good use of both the natural 6, which is a B natural in the key of D, and the flat 6, which is a B flat. So, that's going to be important as far as the segue goes. Mommy's little boy has fallen down. Mommy's little boy just hit the ground. Now he's gone. Iron is gone. His time is done. The weight of a dream can bring you down. The weight of a dream can break you down. White ashes, building crashes down. White ashes, building crashes down. And goes on to the second verse from there. So as you can hear, it's a very dark, thought-provoking song. Now, I believe I've played this live once. I remember people weren't quite sure what to make of it, but I swear at one point I heard someone say something that sounds a bit like Zeppelin. And I remember chuckling to myself because I was thinking, I know something he doesn't. I know where I'm going with this one. Because I fully intended to go into Led Zeppelin's big hit from the Physical Graffiti album, Kashmir. Spelled Kashmir. It's about the Kashmiri people, not cashmere like the sweaters are made of. I'd actually been playing Kashmir quite a bit longer than White Ashes because I learned it to play with the brew. I played all of the string parts on backing keyboards. Now, it's basically the story of the band members meeting members of the Kashmiri people who live in India and hearing their stories of their life, their lifestyle, their conflicts with the government of India, among many other things. So it's sort of a discovery song, and there's a lot of Eastern music influence in terms of the scale, timing patterns, and all of that. So, as if you don't already know it, this is I guess you'd call it a verse of Kashmir, because the structure is kind of A, B, A, C, A, C, roughly. It's Zeppelin. It's pretty difficult to describe what their song structure. Here we go. And as some of you may know, those close to me know, I've actually been taking vocal lessons a lot more recently. I finally started up again because I've been having a little trouble singing. This is a really tough song to sing, so I'm going to give it my best. Hopefully you'll excuse any wavery bits because this is a concept demonstration rather than a for posterity performance. So, it goes something like this. Again, note the flat 6, major 6. Let the sun beat down upon my face. Stars will fill my dreams. I'm a traveler of both time and space to be where I have been. To sit with elders of a gentle race. The world is seldom seen. Talk of days for which they sit and wait. All will be revealed. And then the next verse starts. So the kind of the signature thing about this is, well, no pun intended because we're talking time signatures here, but what it's known for is it's in 4/4. The drums are basically 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But there's kind of a 6/16 pattern going on with the strings and the guitars because they're doing 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. And after, I believe, yeah, it is 4 bars, that lines back up with the 4/4, so it starts the cycle again. Of course, coming out of this crazy descending string pattern, you're actually halfway through that pattern, or a quarter of the way through that pattern, so that's why it feels like it starts on the offbeat, but that pattern is actually going through all parts of the song that are rooted in D. There's a lot of crazy factors about this song, many different things going on, but I believe I've shown you the elements that are essential for this segue. Now, as you can hear, it's much more hard driving. Both have a dark atmosphere, but it's much more hard driving. My phone has low battery. I'm going to see how long I can sneak this out. So you're only going to want to do this one night. White Ashes is much quieter, cerebral, than you want to build. So White Ashes, as you can hear, has this sort of similar sort of ascending thing using the flat 6, but it's in 4/4. So if you wanted, well, we'll get into that, but basically you want to end White Ashes and go into Kashmir. You want to go right from this, and White Ashes ends with this white ashes, building crashes down. Just a hold on that. Now, incidentally, I believe I forgot to mention this, that chorus melody is the same one the voices were chanting on the studio version, just a fun aside. Now, there are two ways you could do this. One is the direct leap. So the minute you hit that last note, you start Kashmir. And that would be something like this. White ashes, building crashes down. And everyone suddenly goes, ah, because they, might have heard a Zeppelin type sound. Maybe they were wondering what this reminded them of. Couldn't quite place it, but then they do. So that's the direct approach. Or there's the wait one measure and then kick in. And if you had a drummer, they'd probably click their sticks for this part. It should be white ashes, building crashes down. I tend to do it this way more often, just to hold the attention on White Ashes for one more bar, to let the vocal melody die naturally, and then leap into Kashmir. That's the way I like to do it. However, if you felt particularly frisky, I can't believe I just used the word frisky in this context, but if you wanted to tease Kashmir before starting it, you could do this in the chorus. White ashes, building crashes down. White white ashes, building crashes down. Do a little bit of the 16th pattern. White ashes. But you'd only really have time to get the first half in, although that's the one that uses the flat 6, which is what the bass of White Ashes is doing anyway. As I said, I prefer to do this only the one way. Now, as it happens, I have a pretty cool ending to Kashmir that I really like. Because basically it fades out on this bridge section. But earlier, to get out of that section and go back to the D section, it has a held vocal note. So I like to repeat that at the end of Kashmir. Just cycle through this a couple times. And there you go. So basically you've started with this, the beginning of White Ashes is just this little couple notes that I think are done on the keyboard. They might be done on the bass. And gradually you build through White Ashes until it builds to its peak, and then you take the leap to Kashmir, which also just builds and builds and builds, and you have a crazy ending. So basically you've created a perfect upward slope. And that is why I don't like to go back into White Ashes, or to why I don't like to start with Kashmir, because then you start midway up, get to the top of the range, then drop to the bottom, and then get back to midway up. It just sounds kind of weird. Of course, this is just my opinion. Please feel free to do this any way you want. That's why I make these videos, just to to give my take on it. Hopefully it'll inspire you to come up with your own, do things your own way, whatever you want. But that is the way I do this one. So again, it's blending a big hit with a real obscurity, and check out that version of White Ashes, the lyrical live version, because it's definitely worth your time. The arrangement is very cool and very typical Peter Gabriel sparse instrumentation. It's just great. And of course, Kashmir is just a legendary song in itself. I think this is the first time I have ever done a Segue Says podcast involving Led Zeppelin. I might be wrong, and I'll go back and double check this later, but I do have in the covers playlist on my YouTube page, which you're probably watching this on, you can find a live performance of Immigrant Song in which I cameo the theme from Knight Rider. At the end. So it's not the first Zeppelin segue that I've come up with, but it's the first, although I had this one before Immigrant Song in my performances, but this is the first time Zeppelin has appeared in Segue Says, though I very much doubt it will be the last. Some foreshadowing there. But in any event, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully I've helped you discover at least one new song, and I will see you next week.